Hey Sky fam, it's girl Ariel and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to go over some frequently asked questions while I am getting ready for work. So let's get into it. Just the first simple question of how to become a flight attendant. Now, I've said this in a lot of other videos. I think you should go ahead and make profiles on all of the airlines that you're interested in, and also set up notifications for whenever their application opens. You can get an email, and some of them you even get a text, I believe. This way you can be one of the first to know when applications open, when you get that notification, and that means your resume is already set up and probably a few simple questions already in your profile, which will make your application process a lot quicker. What qualifications do you need? The most that you are required to have is a high school diploma or a GED. A college diploma is not required. Some airlines might say it makes you more competitive, but it is not required at all for any airline. Someone asked, how long does it take to become a flight attendant? This question is kind of like hard to answer because everyone's timeline is different. The first time I applied to become a flight attendant, I literally got hired in 4 days. The second time I applied for my current airline, it took about 6 months. So your timeline is going to be different depending on a number of factors. If hiring is happening at that time, where your application landed in the amount of applicants, or how aggressively the company is hiring at that time. So all of those factors play a role. When I got hired the first time, they were very aggressively hiring. Pandemic type time, so there wasn't even like a face-to-face, but now everything is back normal. You will be expected to go through a few rounds of interviewing before you get to your face-to-face. I always say hearing nothing is better than hearing something. TBNTs, thanks but no thanks. That's usually when the company sends you an email like, thank you for your application. At this time, we are not moving forward. As long as you don't get that email, that means that your application is still being processed and there's still hope. I've gotten quite a few questions about flight attendant school. Now, what I offer as one-on-one calls, that is actual prep for your interview or to analyze your resume or the interview process, prepped for training, and things like that. It's not a flight attendant school. You do not need to go to any flight attendant school, spend hundreds or thousands of dollars if you plan on flying commercially. Now, if you want to fly private, you do have to do school because you have to get your own qualifications at that point. However, if you want to fly commercial, when I say commercial, I mean Delta, American, United, Southwest, Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, any major US airline, that is commercial. If you want to fly for them, you do not need to go to flight attendant school. Please do not waste your money on these schools that teach you whatever, because you do not need those for commercial. Those big airlines in the US, even in other countries, like even if you wanted to fly for Singapore Airlines or Asiano or Emirates, all of those airlines, all major airlines train you. You do not need to go there already having had some type of qualifications, okay? So please save yourself the money, save yourself the time. Do not attend flight attendant schools if you want to normal flight attendant commercial career, okay? Okay. If any of my answers to your questions have been helpful, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We are on the way to 7,000 in the Sky fam, and we are only like 600 away. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Now back into the questions. Okay, how much do flight attendants make? Now, this varies a lot, okay? This varies by what airline you're at and by your seniority. So everything in the airline industry is based off seniority. The longer you're there, the more you are getting paid, okay? So I just got a contractual raise, which means we are unioned and we have a contract in place right now that gives us an annual raise, okay? So luckily for me, I get 2 raises at the same time just because of how I graduated. So in May is when our contractual raise always happens. This is not the same every year. This is not the same for every company. This is specifically for my company. Our contract was ratified in May, so we get our raises every May for as long as this contract is in play, right? So I get my annual raise, and then I got my seniority raise. So I had another anniversary. I am officially here for 3 years, which time flies because that's nuts. But I've been here for 3 years now, and now I got a raise for my 3-year, but I also got my raise for the contract, okay? So I got 2 at the same time. I'm working with someone right now that graduated in February, the same year I did. So she got her 3-year raise in February, and then in May she got her contractual raise. So that's why I'm saying I happen to get mine at the same time just because of how I happen to graduate, but that's not the case for everyone. And it probably won't happen like that, I don't know, ever again, or like when our next contract happens. It was just a coincidence that worked out. So we are just doing LA Girl concealer under the eyes. I just fan it out there, and I did it under my brows, and those are the only places I'm doing concealer today. I'm not doing any foundation. The dependence on how much money you make also depends on if your company has minimums and maximums. So if your company has maximums, that means there's a limit on the certain amount of hours that you can work a month. So if the maximum you can work in a month is 120 hours, that means even if like you have the legalities to work more than that, the system literally will not let you pick up anything more than that to work. So that's how much you're going to work, and you basically have a roof on how much you can make a month. Now at my company, we do not have maximums. We don't have minimums or maximums. So really here you have a lot of control over how much you make. So if you want to work a 200-hour month, you can. If you want to work a 20-hour month, you can. That just depends on what you require or what you want to make. So that's how that works. If you want a video on the difference between Middle Eastern airlines and US carriers, let me know. It's something I've been thinking about making, but I don't know if y'all want it, so I haven't cared to make it yet. But there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences that I think are interesting, and if you're considering like an Emirates or a Qatar or an Etihad, let me know and I can give you more information on that. Now, flight attendants are paid per flight hour. Some airlines like Delta are now paying for boarding pay, which means you're getting paid during the boarding process now. However, most airlines do not pay boarding pay at this time. Now, there might be ways around that. So like my company, we pay in rigs, so our pay is rigged to almost account for that, but we don't have like a separate pay on our pay stub. Like when you look at your payroll, that's separate just for boarding pay. Otherwise, when you're on the ground, you're just getting paid per diem once your trip starts. So per diem is anywhere between $2 and some change to $3 and some change, depending on the airline and depending on if you're flying domestic or international. So international per diem will typically be a little more, and then your domestic per diem will be a little less. If you're working, let's say 76 hours, which is kind of average, let's say it's all domestic, you can maybe expect somewhere around like additional $500 in your paycheck just from per diem, something like that. The idea of per diem is to accommodate for the cost of like food and things like that when you are on your overnight, but you're not paid it during that time, you're paid it on your paycheck, okay? But you can see how it is quantified on your payroll. I know I look a little crazy right now. It's gonna come together, I promise. I'm a heavy blush girl. I like a lot of blush. Other things that you might get paid for as well is if you are a purser or if you're working the lead position. At certain airlines like the big three, purser is a whole nother category you go through as a flight attendant. Not anybody can just be purser. So that is a raise that you'll get as well. At my airline, we do not have any type of hierarchy per se. Anybody can work in the A position. And so it really is up for anyone, but you are paid an additional $4 for working that position as opposed to the rest of the crew. So that's really the only difference there. When you're starting out, I'll be completely honest, I love to be honest with you all. When you're starting out, the pay may not be great, especially if you're coming from a career. I really like to discuss this with people, especially when they book one-on-ones with me and they're coming from like corporate America. When you're working a 40-hour week, you are going to go through a very, very different experience becoming a flight attendant because our full time is about 74 hours a month. As a flight attendant, according to the FAA, you are not able to work more than 6 days in a row. Some people do finesse this and find ways around it by having like a really long layover within their trip. As long as you have a layover, that is at least 24 hours. So some airlines have like 30-hour layovers. Like my first airline had 30-hour layovers. So you could technically work like 8 days in a row if you had a trip in there somewhere that had a 30-hour layover, because technically you're getting the required rest that's needed, because that's a whole 24 hours that has to be there. Otherwise, you can work 6 days, be off 1, and then work another 6, something like that. Understanding how your schedule might work is a big thing when pivoting, and understanding that the pay is going to probably be drastically different because you're no longer working 40-hour weeks. Let's say you're working 160-hour month, going from that to a 74-hour month, depending on what bills and what responsibilities you have, may not seem like it makes sense. So it is something to keep in mind. I don't think it's something to deter you. I think it is something to go in knowing. So I think you should have a savings set up, especially for when you're at training, have savings set up for when you first get started. Most airlines top out, which means the highest of our pay scale, around 13 years. For some people it's a little less, some people it's a little bit more. It's usually between 12 and 15 years at the airline is when you top out. The age requirement for flight attendants, so for regional airlines, the age requirement is actually 18. So there, if you go on YouTube and you see like 18-year-old flight attendant, they're at a regional airline, okay? If you want to work at a major airline, the Delta, American, United, Southwest, even the budget carriers, JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier, you have to be 21. And you have to be 21 at time of application. They're a height and weight requirement. Now, this is why I was saying if you want a video about like the differences between US carriers and Middle Eastern carriers, is because this is one of the big things that is a very big difference. So in the US, you are not going to be weighed, you're not going to have to provide your BMI. Actually, most airlines don't even have a actual height requirement. Now, at my regional, it did, because those are smaller aircrafts and they're shorter. So I believe you have to be at least 5'3" and less than 6 foot, or like max 6 foot. Because if you're like 6'2", you're not standing up straight on those planes. Like you're not standing up straight on a CRJ. Just not happening, much less a 200. Like, no, it's not happening. However, at the major airlines, there is not a max height, because those aircrafts are much larger and accommodate for very tall people, obviously. So that isn't a problem at all for major carriers. The biggest thing that's going to happen is that they are going to have you do a reach test. Now, as long as you can reach what they need you to reach, you're good. There's not an actual height nor weight requirement, just a reach requirement. Now, something else they might do is have you go through the simulation of the overwing exit door. Now, that is the smallest emergency exit door on the aircraft. And so if you're able to fit through that door, essentially you're good. They might have you walk down a simulation of the aisle to make sure that you can walk down it comfortably. And then they might have you sit down in the jump seat to make sure that harness buckles. Now, those are the most at which they will test you, but at no point will they actually weigh you before or while you are a flight attendant with that carrier. I'm just going to use this, actually is a foundation brush, but I'm going to use this to buff out my concealer. I just like it to actually dry down a bit. That's how you get it to actually not crease, and it's not going to spread too much. You see how that tones down my blush as well. That's why I spread the concealer after I do my blush. And then I'm just going to press around in some of my highlighted spots with the excess, so that it doesn't have like hard creases. Do flight attendants fly for free? Okay, yes and no. So this is how this works. When we are flying domestically, yes. So for a lot of US carriers, you are able to commute, and most airlines do have commuter policies. That means you do not have to live in the same base that you fly out of. Now, I am a lifetime commuter. I have always commuted, so I have become very accustomed to this life and very much know the commuter policy at my company. Commuting can be a lot, I'll be completely honest. It means that you are traveling on your off days, and you are responsible for getting to work and being where you need to be in that correct time period. It is not something you have to do, it's something you choose to do, and if you choose to do it, then I hope you do it well. Okay, but it's completely possible. I have done it for literally my entire flight attendant career. So in saying that, when I'm flying from Atlanta or Miami to Chicago or Nashville or wherever I'm starting a trip at, that flight is free. When I'm flying domestically, not even just to and from work, but if I'm visiting my family or whatever, I can fly domestically completely for free, yes. domestically. When I say domestically, that means within, not even just mainland, but within the United States, okay? So even like to the US Virgin Islands or to Alaska, like you still fly those for free. Now there's two main ways to fly internationally. Now, if you've been around here for a while, if you've watched any of my travel vlogs, then you know that I travel extensively internationally. And most times I am flying on my benefits. And so with that, we have partnerships with other carriers so that you're able to fly on other airlines and fly internationally. Now, for some airlines like the big three, where they are a part of alliances, then you really only have access to your alliance. It can sometimes be a bit of a restriction, but not particularly always. For airlines that are not a part of any particular carrier, such as mine, sometimes we do have access to a few more because we don't have the restrictions of being a part of an alliance, so that can be beneficial. When we are booking those, we have our own portal that we go through. It's called a Z ticket or a Z fare, and we will pay significantly less. Essentially, we pay the base of the flight and taxes. So a flight that would maybe be like $800, we might pay like $134. It also depends on the airline. Like I know someone that used to work at a regional, and the regional works under all of the main airlines, and so they have more of an employee discount than I do because I don't work for those airlines. So we could be going to the same place on the same exact flight and their ticket would end up being cheaper than mine. I'm not gonna lie. SkyWest, my previous airline, my regional, has the best flight benefits in the industry. There's no question about it. Probably the thing I miss the most. The other way you can book flights is through ID90, so that is essentially 90% off of the ticket. I haven't booked any international travel using ID90, but I have booked a hotel here and there through it, so it doesn't just have your flights, it also has other things that you can book, packages, I think maybe even rentals, like a lot of stuff on there that you can book at a significantly discounted rate that is just for people in our industry, so that is nice. So for my company, since we don't technically have like a first class, we aren't able to fly first class on other companies. So a lot of the things are reciprocal. If you watch the video of me flying first class to Japan, I paid like 400 something one way to fly in first class. Now, for someone watching this that does not have benefits, they're probably like, wow, that's so cheap, that's so good. But for us on our side, we're like, that's so expensive because $400 for a one way is significantly expensive for us. Like, I hope there's someone in the comments that's like, I can't believe that's how much you paid, because for us, that is a lot. So let's get into hair now, while I continue with a few more of these questions. What is flight attendant training like? So I just did a whole video on what flight attendant training is like. If you haven't seen it, I will make sure to add the card up here. But honestly, flight attendant training is not the hardest thing you are ever going to do in your life. And that is what I will continue saying until I am out of breath. It can be difficult, yes, but it is not the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life. I'm going to use a little bit of heat protectant on my leave out here, and then I will be straightening it a little bit, but I think I'm gonna just let it be wavy for the most part, if I'm being honest. Depending on what airline you're at, flight attendant training will be anywhere between 4 weeks and 8 weeks. During that flight attendant training, just be smart, and I'm not talking about with the academic things, I'm talking about with everything else. I feel like a lot of people get sent home for a lot of things that are completely irrelevant to academics, and that is probably my biggest piece of advice, is just keep your head down, take it day by day, and don't get caught up in all of the extraness that happens at training. Focus on your schoolwork, study every single day. It is not that bad, it is not that bad, it is not that bad. I promise, it is not that bad. I'm not gonna go deep into that because I have a full video on it, and so if you really want all the details and all the advice, watch that one. How hard is it to become a flight attendant? This is kind of hard to answer because honestly, it's very subjective. It seems like it's difficult mainly because the airlines are not constantly hiring, and that is the biggest part of it, is finding when the applications are open. Once that's there, then your chances are just as good as anybody else's in theory. The difference will become in the strength of your resume and things like that. I don't want to say it's particularly hard. Now, there are hundreds of thousands of people a year that apply to be a flight attendant, yes, and obviously not everyone makes it, but like I said, that comes down to the first part of it is your resume, and then once you get past that, it's how well you interview, okay? So So that's why I do one-on-one calls, because interviewing is what makes or break if you get hired or not. And sometimes it's not that you're not interviewing well, but you just might not be who that particular airline wants, which I think is okay. Every airline looks for different things in their flight attendants, and you can probably tell that even as you're flying as a customer. So I think it's completely fine to realize, even if you get hired and you're in the process and you're out on the line and you're like, yeah, I don't think this is the right place for me. I don't think there's particularly any harm in airline hopping, as they call it, but I think once you find your forever home, once you find your airline home, then you're good, you're happy, you are the right match, and that's what's important. Sometimes you're not meant to be in certain environments, and that's fine. A closed door does not mean no, it just means another one is going to open, okay? That is, I feel like, a part of it. I don't think it's particularly hard. I think it can be difficult, but there are hundreds of thousands of flight attendants hired around the world. It's not impossible, okay? This is a good one. What are the pros and cons of being a flight attendant? I could probably do a whole video just on this, honestly, actually. But, you know, honestly, there are a lot of pros. There are also a good bit of cons. It depends on what you want out of this. If you want it to be your career and things like that, then there are different things that are at play. For instance, it is great because of many of the benefits that we have and just the barrier that you have to get in. So as a flight attendant, especially one that has been here for some time, you can make quite good money, and that's without needing a college degree or having to have any type of formal education. Most careers that even make the same amount as us, you do need some type of traditional schooling, and with being a flight attendant, you don't have that barrier of entry, and that is, I think, a really good pro. Now, a con can be that you don't maybe have as much flexibility over your schedule, especially in the beginning. Now, it probably won't always be like this, especially, as I said, the more seniority you gain, because like I said, everything is based off of seniority. However, in the beginning, you might be working on holidays, so you might miss Christmases, you might miss birthdays, you might miss Thanksgiving, you might miss a lot of things, and that can be very difficult in the beginning. However, I mean, at least on every holiday, you're getting holiday pay, at the least. I don't know if that helps anybody, but I think I've worked every single Christmas I've been a flight attendant, just because that's not a super huge holiday for my family right now. And so I try to get Thanksgiving off, but that is not always possible. I think I had to work Thanksgiving last year for the very first time in my career. And even my very first year here, people were like, oh, you'll never get Thanksgiving off. It's such a big holiday. And I got Thanksgiving off my first year. So even though I said you might not have as much control over your schedule as a newer hire, you still do have the ability to bid every single month, you know? So you do have some access over it, but that is the reality, is that you're probably gonna miss some things that are important, and we just try to make up for those times when we are there. A pro, obviously, is the ability to travel, to see the world, to use our benefits. Now, the airline I work for, we don't work a lot of international. I'm never really doing my fun international trips, flying on my own airline, very few in between. So with other carriers, with bigger airlines that, you know, fly and do international routes to Asia and Africa and South America, those flight attendants are essentially getting whole vacations while being paid. They're getting a whole like 60-hour layover while they're in a different country and being able to explore that entire time. That means their accommodations is being covered. I mean, obviously their flight was covered because they were working it. They're essentially getting paid for a vacation, which is pretty cool. Those trips typically do go more senior, as I keep saying. However, one of my friends graduated out of training, and her very first trip out of training on reserve was a trip to Rome. So you never know, like our schedules are so crazy, so random when you are on reserve, and so you might get the opportunity to work in international quite new into the career. I've worked to Hawaii randomly, and some people like fight for a Hawaii flight, okay? So It really just depends. If you're in a relationship, it can be difficult. It can be fun because you can maybe put them on your benefits and they can come with you, or they may not like you being gone as much, and that might be, you know, something that you'll have to deal with. Or if you're just starting to date, that might be something to deal with. I know I've dealt with it, so I'm sure plenty of y'all have as well. There are stereotypes of flight attendants and things like that, so there are pros and cons. However, I really do love my career. Like I said, I just had my 3-year anniversary, and I absolutely love the flexibility I have. The flexibility I have in my schedule is unlike any other career I would have had. I don't even know what it's like to work a 9 to 5. I can't imagine sitting behind a desk. I can't imagine being micromanaged. I can't imagine having a direct supervisor that's literally over my neck and like can see me through a window or like a wall every day. For the most part, this is a career where you, as long as you know how to do your job and you do it well, you basically never have to speak to anybody about anything, okay? Do what you need to do, get it done, and you're golden for years and years and decades, literally. And that's nice. A lot of other careers have, you know, certain things that they have to speak to direct supervisors and have reviews and things like that. We don't have to deal with those things. As long as you do your job well, you show up on time, you don't collect points, you're good, you're golden. And I think that is where I'm going to close it out. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And until next time, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and bye, GRWM.